We are glad to welcome you to the Lucas History Channel. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more stories like this. Enjoy your viewing. The evening started as a haze of laughter, clinking glasses, and polished smiles, a typical corporate event in an upscale restaurant. I should have been enjoying myself, but something felt off. Maybe it was the way my wife, Eliza, lingered too long in conversations with my coworker, Daniel. Or perhaps it was the sidelong glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. I brushed the thoughts away, chalking it up to paranoia. Eliza was stunning tonight, her emerald green dress hugging her figure, her smile bright enough to make me forget my growing unease. But as the evening progressed, that smile started to feel like a mask. After a round of toasts, our manager suggested we pair up for a team-building exercise, sharing a memorable professional or personal story. The idea seemed harmless, but when Daniel eagerly moved to Eliza's side, my stomach knotted. "Hey, David," he said, his grin too wide, his tone too casual. "Mind if I borrow Eliza for this one?" I plastered on a smile. "Of course. She's great at storytelling." Eliza's laugh was light, but her cheeks flushed as she linked her arm with his. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll save the best stories for you later." The room seemed to buzz louder, the chatter blending into an incomprehensible din. I couldn't focus on my partner's words as I tried to keep an eye on them. Every gesture between Eliza and Daniel felt loaded, too familiar, too intimate. "David," my partner's voice snapped me back. "You okay?" "Yeah, sorry. Just distracted." By the time the exercise ended, my mood had soured. I found Eliza and Daniel laughing over something near the dessert table. She touched his arm, leaning in closer than necessary. "Eliza," I called, keeping my tone even. "We should head out soon." She glanced at me, her smile faltering. "Already? We haven't even had dessert." "It's getting late," I said, masking the edge in my voice. "Just a few more minutes," she replied, turning back to Daniel. I clenched my jaw and nodded, walking away to give myself a moment to cool down. Maybe I was overreacting. Eliza was friendly, and Daniel was charming, that's all it was. Right? I wandered to the bar, ordering a whiskey neat. As I sipped, a colleague approached, his expression wary. "David," he began, lowering his voice. "I don't know how to say this, but you should keep an eye on Eliza and Daniel." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady despite the icy dread creeping into my chest. He hesitated before continuing, "They were close at the last office party too. Just thought you should know." My hand tightened around the glass as I thanked him and walked away, my heart pounding. When I returned to the main room, Eliza and Daniel were gone. Panic swelled in my chest as I scanned the room, searching for any sign of Eliza or Daniel. I told myself I was being unreasonable. They were likely talking somewhere quieter, away from the crowd. That's what I hoped, at least. I approached a colleague near the entrance. "Have you seen Eliza?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "She left with Daniel a few minutes ago," he replied casually, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Every nerve in my body buzzed. For a moment, I considered letting it go, pretending I didn't hear what he said. But a voice in the back of my mind wouldn't let me. Without a word, I grabbed my coat and headed toward the exit. The cold night air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside. The valet had just brought my car around, but I stopped him, choosing instead to head around the side of the restaurant where the parking lot lay shrouded in dim light. It didn't take long to find them. They were standing beside Daniel's car, their silhouettes framed by the faint glow of a street lamp. Her laugh drifted toward me, light and carefree, cutting through the frigid air like a blade. I forced myself to stay hidden, watching as he leaned closer, his hand brushing her arm. She didn't pull away. "Eliza," I called, stepping into the light. The look on her face was one I'd never forget, shock, guilt and something else I couldn't place. David, she stammered. What are you doing out here? I was about to ask you the same thing. My voice was steady, but I could feel the anger rising, boiling just beneath the surface. Daniel straightened, his confident smirk faltering. David, hey. We were just. Save it, I snapped, cutting him off. My eyes never left Eliza's. Is there something you want to tell me? She opened her mouth, then closed it again, searching for words. Her hesitation was answer enough. Eliza. I pressed, my voice breaking on her name. It's not what it looks like, she said finally, her voice trembling. Then what is it? I asked, stepping closer. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife and my coworker have something they'd rather keep from me. David, calm down, Daniel interjected, holding up his hands as if to defuse the situation. This isn't. You don't get to tell me how to feel, I snapped, turning my glare on him. Eliza stepped between us, her hands raised. David, stop. You're blowing this out of proportion. Am I? I asked, my voice rising. Because I think finding my wife sneaking out of a work event with another man is pretty proportionate cause for concern. Her expression crumbled, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in the perfect image she always maintained. David, she began, her voice soft, pleading. Just tell me the truth, I said. Please. She hesitated, her eyes darting to Daniel before settling on me. And then she spoke the words that shattered everything I thought I knew. It didn't mean anything, she whispered. I stared at her, the weight of her confession sinking in like lead. You have no idea what you've done, I said quietly, my voice thick with pain. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the cold with Daniel by her side. The drive home was a blur, the events replaying in my mind on an endless loop. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were shaking. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the darkened house and wondering how everything had unraveled so quickly. Inside, the emptiness felt suffocating. The pictures on the walls, the remnants of a life we had built together, all of it felt like a cruel joke now. I poured myself a drink, letting the bitterness of the alcohol match the bitterness in my chest. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew this was just the beginning. The full weight of her betrayal hadn't even hit me yet. But when it did, I knew there'd be no going back. The silence at home was deafening. The air carried a stillness that felt foreign, oppressive. It was as if the walls themselves knew something was broken. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at a framed photo of Eliza and me from happier days, our wedding day. She looked radiant, full of life and joy. I wondered if that version of her had been real or just an illusion I desperately wanted to believe in. When I heard the front door open, my chest tightened. Eliza's heels clicked against the floor, hesitant, as if she wasn't sure she belonged here anymore. I didn't move. David, her voice called from downstairs, soft, tentative. I stayed silent, waiting. Moments later, she appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red, but I couldn't find any pity for her. David, she started, stepping into the room. Can we talk? I finally looked at her, my gaze cold and unreadable. Talk. Now you want to talk. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said, sitting across from me. I swear, it wasn't supposed to be like this. Then what was it supposed to be, Eliza? My voice was sharp, each word a challenge. A harmless flirtation? A spark you were missing at home? Or were you just trying to see if you could have it all without consequence? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't relent. I don't know what I was thinking, she admitted. I felt disconnected. Like something was missing. And Daniel, he. Don't, I interrupted, my tone ice cold. Don't try to make this about what you were missing. You had a choice, Eliza. And you chose to betray me. Her hands trembled as she wiped at her tears. I never wanted to hurt you, David. I love you. I laughed bitterly, the sound foreign in the room. You love me? Is that what love looks like to you? Sneaking around with another man? Lying to my face? It wasn't like that, she protested. It was one mistake, one moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything. I stood, pacing the room to contain the storm inside me. You keep saying that, but do you even hear yourself? You risked everything, our marriage, our life together, for something that didn't mean anything. Do you know how pathetic that sounds? Her sobs grew louder, but I refused to soften. Not this time. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Please, David, just tell me what to do. I turned to face her, my jaw tight. Fix it? There's no fixing this, Eliza. Trust isn't something you can patch up with apologies. It's earned, day by day, and you threw it away like it was nothing. She looked up at me, desperation in her eyes. I'll go to counseling. I'll cut Daniel out of our lives. Just give me a chance to make it right. I shook my head, the weight of her words crushing me. The fact that you think it's that simple shows how little you understand the damage you've done. Silence fell between us, thick and suffocating. For the first time in our marriage, I saw her not as my wife, but as a stranger, someone I couldn't trust, someone who had torn apart the foundation we had built together. David, please, she whispered, reaching for my hand. I stepped back, out of her reach. I need time to think, I said flatly. Don't expect answers tonight. Without another word, I walked past her, grabbing my coat and keys. The cool night air greeted me as I stepped outside, and for the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away, from her, from this house, from the life I thought we had. As I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets, a single thought kept looping in my mind. Some things, once broken, can never be made whole again. I drove for hours, the dark streets unfolding endlessly ahead of me. Each passing street lamp cast fleeting shadows across the dashboard, their rhythm a cruel reminder of the stability I had lost. Memories of Eliza, our wedding day, the birth of our first child, the countless nights spent laughing together, flashed through my mind, sharp and bitter. Eventually, I found myself parked by the river. The water mirrored the night sky, its surface calm, belying the storm raging inside me. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, staring at my reflection in the glass. I had always considered myself a man who could weather any storm. Challenges at work, disagreements at home, none of it had ever shaken me like this. But now, faced with Eliza's betrayal, I felt unmoored. The vibration of my phone jolted me from my thoughts. It was Eliza. Her name on the screen sent a wave of anger coursing through me, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Instead, I let it ring, the sound blending with the distant hum of the city. When it stopped, a voicemail notification appeared. I hesitated before pressing play. David, her voice began, trembling and thick with tears. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even comprehend. But I can't bear the thought of losing you. Please, come home so we can talk. I'll do anything to fix this. I love you. I ended the message before it finished, tossing the phone onto the passenger seat. Love? She kept using that word as if it could erase what she had done. What was love, if not loyalty? If not trust? The quiet of the riverbank offered no solace. I leaned back in the seat, closing my eyes, and tried to make sense of it all. Why had she done this? Was it really about feeling desired? Had I missed some sign, some clue that she was unhappy? Or had this been about Daniel all along? His face flashed in my mind, charming, polished, confident. He was everything I wasn't, at least on the surface. The kind of man who thrived in social settings, who could command a room with ease. Had he seen a weakness in Eliza and exploited it? Or had she been a willing participant from the start? My fists clenched at the thought. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't change anything. The damage had already been done. When I finally returned home, the house was dark. Eliza was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, the dim glow of the lamp casting her in shadows. She looked up as I entered, her eyes swollen and red. "David," she said softly, rising to her feet. "I didn't know if you were coming back." I stood in the doorway, the weight of the night pressing down on me. I wasn't sure either. Her lip trembled, but she held her ground. "I need you to know that I'm sorry. Truly. I wasn't thinking." "I wasn't." "You weren't thinking." I interrupted, my voice cutting through the silence. "You knew exactly what you were doing, Eliza. You made a choice, a deliberate choice, to betray me." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't stop. "You say it didn't mean anything, but do you even realize what you've done? You've destroyed the trust we built over years. You've made me question everything about us." Her shoulders shook as she sobbed. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "That's because you can't," I said, the finality of my words sinking into the air between us. "Some things can't be fixed, Eliza. They're just broken." The room fell into a suffocating silence. For the first time, I saw the full weight of her guilt and despair. But instead of feeling satisfaction, all I felt was emptiness. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight," I said, turning away. "We'll figure out what comes next in the morning." As I climbed the stairs, I heard her muffled cries below, but I didn't look back. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for certain: we were standing on the edge of the abyss, and there was no telling if we'd make it back. The morning light seeped through the blinds, casting long, thin shadows across the walls of the guest room. I hadn't slept, not really. My body ached from the stiffness of the couch, and my mind was raw from replaying the events of the night before. The scent of coffee wafted faintly through the air, a small sign that Eliza was awake. For a brief moment, the normalcy of it, the mundane rhythm of our mornings, almost made me forget. Almost. I steeled myself and went downstairs. Eliza was standing by the kitchen counter, her hands wrapped around a mug, her face pale and drawn. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, her expression a mixture of hope and trepidation. "David," she began, her voice fragile, "can we talk?" I grabbed a mug from the cabinet and poured myself coffee, the clink of the spoon against the ceramic filling the silence. "What is there left to say?" "Everything," she said, stepping closer. "I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. But I need you to understand, it wasn't about you. It wasn't about us." "Then what was it about, Eliza?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Because you didn't just hurt me. You tore apart everything we built together. You betrayed me." Tears welled in her eyes, but she pressed on. "I know. And I can't undo what I did. But I was lost, David. I felt invisible. Like I was fading into the background of my own life. And when Daniel paid attention to me, it was like I mattered again. Like I was worth noticing." Her words struck a chord I didn't want to acknowledge. Part of me understood that feeling, that need to be seen. But understanding didn't lessen the betrayal. "You think I don't notice you?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You think I haven't spent every day of our marriage loving you, showing you that you matter? Do you have any idea how much this hurts?" She reached out, but I stepped back, the gap between us growing wider. "I thought we were happy," I continued, my voice thick with emotion. "Maybe not perfect, but strong. And now? I don't know what's real anymore." She began to sob, her hands trembling as she covered her face. "I made a terrible mistake," she said between gasps. But I love you, David. I love you so much. Please don't give up on us. I stared at her, the woman I had loved for so many years, and felt the weight of her words pressing down on me. But love, I realized, wasn't always enough. I need time, Eliza, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. Time to figure out if I can live with what you've done. Time to decide if I can forgive you. Her face crumpled, but she nodded, her tears spilling freely. I'll wait, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I left the kitchen, the coffee untouched, and stepped outside. The crisp morning air hit my face, clearing the fog in my mind. I didn't know what the future held or if our marriage could survive this. All I knew was that the man I was before last night no longer existed. And neither did the life I thought we had. The road ahead felt uncertain, daunting. But as I walked down the driveway, letting the cool breeze wash over me, I knew one thing for sure, the decisions I made next would define everything that came after. The days that followed felt like a balancing act between my anger, grief, and a small, stubborn hope that something salvageable remained. Eliza gave me space as promised, but her presence in the house felt like a ghost lingering in the corners of my mind. She moved quietly, avoiding any further confrontation, yet her every glance carried unspoken pleas for forgiveness. I spent most of my time away from home. I took long drives, visited coffee shops, and even found myself at the office on weekends, hoping the hum of productivity might drown out my thoughts. But no matter where I went, I couldn't escape the questions. Could I forgive her? Should I forgive her? What would forgiveness even mean? One evening, I met with an old friend, Jake, someone I hadn't seen in years but who had always been a steady presence during life's storms. We sat in a quiet bar, the kind of place where the music was soft, and the bartenders knew when to leave you alone. So, Jake said, leaning back in his chair after I told him everything. What are you going to do? I shook my head, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. I don't know. Part of me wants to walk away and never look back. But then I think about our life, our kids, everything we've built. I trailed off, the weight of it all pressing against my chest. Jake nodded thoughtfully. It's a tough call, man. No one can tell you what's right. But I'll say this, whatever you decide, make sure it's what you can live with. Not just now, but years from now. His words echoed in my mind as I drove home that night. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Inside, the living room lamp cast a soft glow over the space, and there she was, curled up on the couch, fast asleep. Her face looked peaceful, unguarded. For a moment, I could almost believe we were back to how things used to be. Almost. I walked past her, careful not to wake her, and climbed the stairs to the guest room. As I sat on the edge of the bed, Jake's advice replayed in my mind. Could I live with walking away? Or would I always wonder if we could have found a way back to each other? The next morning, I woke early and found Eliza already in the kitchen. She looked up as I entered, her expression uncertain. We need to talk, I said, gesturing for her to sit at the table. She nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I began. About us, about what happened, and about what it would take to move forward. Her eyes glistened, but she stayed silent, letting me speak. I'm not going to pretend this can be fixed overnight, I continued. What you did broke something between us. Something I don't know if we can ever fully repair. But for the sake of the life we've built and the family we've created, I'm willing to try, on one condition. Anything, she whispered, her voice trembling. We go to counseling, I said firmly. Both of us. Together and separately. If we're going to have any chance of rebuilding trust, we need help. Real help. She nodded quickly, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'll do it. Whatever it takes, David. I'll do anything. This isn't a promise that everything will work out, I added, my tone serious. But it's a chance. That's all I can give right now. She reached across the table, her hand hovering over mine. I hesitated before letting her touch me, her fingers warm and tentative. Thank you, she said, her voice breaking. I won't waste this chance. As I left the house that day, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in weeks, cautious hope. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't certainty, but it was a step toward the unknown, where anything was still possible. Months passed, each day marked by painstaking effort to rebuild something that had once seemed unshakable. Therapy sessions became a regular part of our lives, forcing us to confront truths that were uncomfortable and often painful. Eliza was unflinchingly honest in her sessions. She admitted to the loneliness and insecurities she had buried for years, feelings she hadn't even shared with me. I, too, unearthed things I hadn't realized, moments where I had taken her for granted, assuming my efforts were enough without asking if they met her needs. But while her vulnerability gave me glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with, the memories of her betrayal loomed large, refusing to fade entirely. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Eliza and I sat in the living room in silence. The air between us felt heavier than usual. Finally, she spoke. David, I need to say this. I looked up, meeting her steady gaze. I know I've said I'm sorry, she began, her voice calm but resolute. But I don't think I've fully understood what that word really means. I can't undo what I've done. I can't erase the pain I caused or the trust one destroyed. But I want you to know that I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, not because I expect forgiveness, but because you deserve more than what I gave you. Her words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. For the first time, I saw not just regret in her eyes but true accountability. Thank you for saying that, I said after a moment, my voice soft. It doesn't make everything better, but it's a start. She nodded, tears glistening but unshed. I'll take whatever start you're willing to give me. It was in that moment I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to move forward despite it. 6 months later, life had taken on a tentative rhythm again. We weren't the same as before, but perhaps that was for the best. Our relationship had been stripped down to its foundation, forcing us to rebuild piece by piece. There were still moments of doubt, times when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But then there were the little things, Eliza's unwavering commitment to regaining my trust, the way she made sure to show her love not just in words but in actions, and the way our family had started to feel whole again. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, we sat together on the porch, a glass of wine in her hand and a beer in mine. The quiet was comfortable, filled with a peace I hadn't thought we'd ever find again. You know, I said, breaking the silence, I didn't think we'd make it here. Neither did I, she admitted, her smile small but genuine. But I'm glad we did. I reached over, taking her hand in mine. It felt natural, unforced, a gesture of connection that didn't feel weighted down by the past. We still have a lot of work to do, I said, looking out at the fading light. She squeezed my hand. And I'm here for all of it. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I believed her. The road hadn't been easy, and it wouldn't always be smooth. But sitting there with Eliza, I understood something important. Healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about choosing to keep going. And we were. Together. Thank you for watching to the end. Write in the comments what you liked and what you would like to see next.